High class, in China, the first human settlements were concentrated along the Yellow River in the north and the Yangtze River to the south. And in contrast to other major riverine cultures, China will develop more slowly. Some of the reasons for this include a lack of domesticated plants and animals early on, and geographic barriers that impeded migration and the spread of ideas. But still, evidence shows distinct regional cultures are going to emerge in this space between about 4000 and 2000 BCE. This was never a fully isolated region, and over time, both the ocean and the Mongolian steppes are going to allow outsiders to introduce new technologies and goods in this long period. They're going to develop some domesticated plants and animals for their use, and there's going to be people coming in and settling along the river. So why is the Yellow River called China's Sorrow? The Yellow River is one of several rivers that are essential for China's existence. At the same time, however, it has been responsible for much death and destruction. China's sorrow. Records show a flooded Yellow River is the only natural disaster in recorded history to have killed more than 1 million people. Among the deadliest floods that there's records for was in 1332, during the Yuan dynasty, the 1887 flood during the Qing dynasty. That one killed about 900,000 to 2 million people. But then there was a 1931 flood that killed between 1 and 4 million people. And again, these are just the ones that we have record of. In over a 2,000-year period, from about 595 BCE to 1946, the Yellow River has flooded over 1,500 times. It's shifted its course 26 times. And before modern disaster type management, when floods occurred, some of the population might initially die from drowning, but then more would suffer from the ensuing famine and spread of disease. The yellow color of the Yellow River comes from the lowest sediment. It consists of part clay, sand, and chalk. This makes for a very rich soil. Now, class, there is one river in the United States that has lowest deposits. Does anybody know which one? The mighty Mississippi. It is the second longest river in the United States, too, by the way, behind the Missouri. The Yellow River is also one of the longest rivers in Asia. I think it's about 6th in the world. And does anybody know what the longest river in the world is? Depending on who you ask, it's the Nile in Egypt or the Amazon in South America. The Yangtze in China comes in at about 3rd. So the future Chinese state will originate along the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers. Yet, as I mentioned, Chinese culture is going to be a bit slower to develop than, let's say, the Mesopotamia or Indus River Valley regions. For example, the evolution of just city-states, bureaucratic classes, and a writing system is going to take longer here than it does in other areas, but it does come to pass, obviously. But one issue that was a problem was to have domesticated animals and plants. Eventually, they're going to domesticate things like the water buffalo and native plants like rice. The Yellow River Basin evidence tells us that there were about 8 distinct regional cultures that appeared between 4000 and 2000 BCE. And again, China's never fully isolated like, let's say, the Americas are. There's ocean borders and the Mongolian steppes, and this is going to allow the spread of new technology, people, and goods during this time, like the chariot, horses, and bronze working. Yangtze was one of the first of these cultures to develop along the Yellow River, succeeded only by the Longshan around 3000 BCE. And so for the next millennium, the Longshan shows the beginnings of urban life on these plains, where it had a broad cultural influence as well as migration. Now, among its remains among remains that have been discovered at the settlement of Bon Po, we are able to see through archaeological digs defensive walls, wells, and cemeteries outside of the villages. Their tombs housed such objects as pottery, wooden instruments, and painted murals. We also find evidence where they're beginning to domesticate things like ducks and pigs and goats for food. Obviously, they have rice, and they also have a type of wheat called millet. The early Chinese are going to practice a slash and burn agricultural society. They also produced these incredible jade axes that were used by shamans in rituals, and it really reflected some advanced technology for those. They suggest, along with these mass graves and defensive walls, that there was some threat of organized violence in this period. There's also evidence, class, of the earliest silk cultivation, and they also wove hemp. Now, they were very skilled at pottery by using pottery wheels, and they were noted for their highly polished black pottery. It's just incredible. There's some evidence of some short-lived political organizations. I think the textbook talks a little bit about the 10,000 states. They developed into a shamanistic type society, and they also developed a very unique language and later writing. Extended droughts in the third millennium limit some development, but by the early second millennium, Chinese cultures recover and develop elaborate agrarian systems along the Yellow and then the Yangtze rivers, resembling those of other major riverine cultures that we've talked about. China also develops an extensive trade network with other regions and a highly stratified social hierarchy. And this centralized polity will eventually be run by a powerful monarch in the tradition of what they call sage kings. And this really sets the pattern for Chinese culture. We're going to see China develop in many different ways than other nation states that we're discussing. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about China in this class over time. I've pulled in some more details for you about the ancient Chinese civilization in your Canvas module class. As usual, keep in touch.